Yes. And so, Keith, Kevin, who wants to go first? If you would introduce yourself, what you're doing or what you do, and then we'll ask more questions.
Sounds good. Dad, you do the honors. Go ahead and take it away.
All right. Well, okay. I'm Kevin Weaver, and I am the CEO of the Warrior's Journey, and it's a veteran service organization serving veterans, military members, and their families around the world. And so we're privileged to do that. So that's me. A former Air Force. I'm an Air Force veteran. So yeah.
Okay.
So I'll just throw that in there too. So I tried to get my son to think about the Air Force, but he'll tell you his story on that.
No luck on that. Yeah, my name's Keith Weaver, son of Kevin Weaver. Been in the Army for six and a half years now. I'm an Army officer. Yep, continuing Army service, and it's been a wild ride, but fortunately I've had, my dad to kind of give me some guidance along the way, and I'm sure we'll be able to talk a little bit more about that as we go through today's conversation. So, yeah.
Well, great. Thank you. Well, we're doing this is because basically this series is entitled, What Do You Want to Do When You Grow Up? Because it's about this time of year where imagine when you were 16 or 17 years old and your parent was saying to you, so just going into your senior year of high school, what do you see yourself doing a year from now? So, you're going to go to college. A lot of parents are saying, well, you're not just going to stay home on the couch and play video games. So what is it that you want to do with yourself? So we'd like you to kind of take yourself back to when you were 16 or 17 years old. And Kevin, we'll start with you first. Of course, there's no one here to keep you honest, but as honest as you can be. When you were 16 or 17 years old, what did you think you wanted to do and be?
Yeah, so for me personally, I actually, when I was about 14, my dad had really encouraged me. He was not a military guy, but he worked for the U.S. government as a aerospace engineer. He worked for Lockheed Martin and also worked for a company called Vought. And he designed surface-to-surface missiles for the Army back in the day during Vietnam, and then was a part of the F-16 engineering crew for Lockheed. And so he was very instrumental in that. So I was always enjoyed the idea of flying and being a part of that whole Air Force kind of scene. So that was kind of a big deal to me. So I decided when I was 14 years old that I would start looking at the Air Force Academy. And through a series of events, I actually did follow that process. And then I kind of had a change of mind. Didn't really think about the academy as being where I wanted to go. It's a long story, but I wanted to really kind of had a vision to maybe pursue some ministry outlets, which my dad thought I was nuts. He's like, "What are you thinking? You want to do what?" He goes, "Well, like a pastor of a church." He's like, "Well, that's just crazy. That you'll never succeed at that." So that's a whole nother story. But through that series of me just working through that personally, I ended up not going to the academy, did go to the University of Michigan and Oakland University, where I grew up, taking some engineering courses. Really didn't enjoy any of it, but I was doing that just to kind of, try to follow my dad's advice, and then ended up enlisting in the Air Force, just because I was at that point where I was still here. I was I was 20 years old, getting ready to start my junior year of college. And I'm like, I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. I did, but I was kind of having this thing with my dad and I wanted his blessing, so that was really a great experience for me. That kind of solidified. That military experience was finally this opportunity where I had to be responsible for myself, but also responsible for others, working as a team. And all that experience back in the day, that was back in 1982. And I was in from 82 all the way through the end of 89, but I finished my active duty service in about the middle of 87, but I spent all of it in the Republic of Panama, which was the U.S. Southern Command during the Noriega years, and had some exciting experiences down there with all that. So it was just a really great experience. So growing up and watching our kids grow up, Keith being our middle son, and he can testify to this a little bit better than I can. I'll let him make sure I'm saying this right. I don't think we really ever pressed like we wanted you to join the military. But yet at the same time, we kind of grew up in a family where we're very patriotic, and you get a decent historical movie that comes out about World War II or whatever it might be. We're going to watch that and talk about it, and why are those sacrifices so important? to us as a society. So I really wanted to instill that in my boys. And so that just kind of carried over, even though, hey, if Keith decided he wanted to drive an ice cream truck, that'd have been fine with me, so as long as he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. But he's obviously doing something, I think, a little bit more challenging than that in his service. So yeah, so that's my story. I don't know if that helps, but.
Yeah.
I think my biggest question, Kevin, is the Air Force anything like the movie Top Gun?
Well, that was actually Navy. And
was it Navy? Okay. All right. I'm sorry. I think of flying. So
now the flying, now one thing I will say about the flying scenes in that film, and I've talked to a lot of pilots and a lot of pilots. I have very good friends with some Air Force pilots, and the flying was pretty amazing. It was pretty real to life, I guess, as close as you can be. There are a lot of other things that aren't, all those goofy things that you see. And when you're actually in the military, you go, oh my word, that's not how it works, But anyway, yeah, it was pretty good.
Well, from what I hear, the actors, they only went up like once or twice because they couldn't take it. Like the actual, like they would go up for like 2 minutes and they would come back down and they would all get sick. Yeah. And it's amazing how, like, just behind the scenes when you would talk to the actual pilots that worked with the actors,
right?
And I'm like, how in the world do they handle going up there and doing that? But it just, it takes a very tiny percentage in this world of people who can actually do that.
Yeah, that's true. That's really, really true. And I think that's probably true across all what they call either in the Air Force AFSC or MOSs, across other military jobs, because there's so many jobs. And Keith and my younger son, they're both in a combat arms kind of role. We call them the trigger pullers, but even Keith, you can give the statistics. I think it's less than 3 or 4% of everybody in the Army is actually in that kind of a position. I think it's pretty small.
It's a smaller percentage. I think there's a misconception that, you join the Army and, you're immediately going to be transported to the front lines, but that's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of different opportunities and different jobs that, people fill. And like you said, a small percentage, and depending on what's going on in the world, they're actually kind of put in harm's way in those scenarios. So. Yeah.
So Keith, clearly your dad was in the military, and I know your other older brother was thinking about being in the Air Force. So how did you choose the Army, and were you thinking about that when you were 16 or 17?
So in spite of feeling like at 28, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up, I have vivid memories of kind of the development through childhood into my teenage years of kind of wanting to join the military. And all it had to do with, I think, the global war on terror kicking off. I think, other colleagues I have who are my age, kind of the same year group, have similar experiences, either having, friends or family members who were in the military as kind of the global war on terror kicked off, and kind of seeing them go through those experiences, I think put a drive in a lot of us to want to serve in that same capacity. And for me, I can remember having aspirations to join the military, as early as grade school, maybe 4th or 5th grade, obviously not really knowing, obviously the ins and outs of what that meant, but knowing, hey, I'd want to kind of serve in that capacity as well. Going through high school, I still had those same aspirations, but still didn't really know how that would play out or what the best way forward was into joining the military. Also kind of felt, not necessarily from my parents, but just kind of in general, I wouldn't say pressure, but just kind of the encouragement and influence to attend college as well immediately following high school. I have a vivid memory, I think in the 11th grade, of laying in bed. My grades were kind of tanking. I don't know if it was because I took some, electively took some more challenging classes, but I can remember laying in bed and thinking, I'm not going to college. My grades are too bad. And, what am I going to do? Not knowing what I'm going to do, feeling like I was going to disappoint people, not knowing too that outside of college and the military specifically, there's a lot of opportunities, kind of like my dad was saying, on the enlisted side. I know he has personal experience with that, but there's a lot of opportunities to have, really successful careers and go far on the enlisted side of the military. But fortunately, I was able to get my grades up the following year. And, I think I told my dad, I'm going to enlist in the Army and this is what I want to do. And he's like, okay, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I'd like to encourage you to just at least try, see if you can apply for this ROTC scholarship. My older brother was doing Air Force ROTC at the University of Kansas. So I kind of had some insight into how that worked a little bit. Not thinking I was going to get any kind of scholarship or anything that would pay for school through this. I was just kind of going through the motions, retook my ACT because my ACT score was terrible. Fortunately, did a little bit better. I found out later that's the only reason why I ended up getting an ROTC scholarship. And I attended Pittsburgh State University in Southeast Kansas on an Army ROTC scholarship. And from there, it was kind of all downhill. And obviously through that experience was able to learn kind of what would be following college, kind of what military service would look like, the opportunities and different things that you pursue as a part of military career. And that too, just the influence of family growing up. You know, my dad's experience, had a cousin who was in the Marine Corps, still in the Marine Corps, and served all the way through pretty much the beginning of the Global War on Terror. And I kind of got to talk to him quite a bit and get some kind of extensive firsthand knowledge on his part that he was able to pass to me that really influenced in kind of my decision-making process and joining the military. So a lot of good influences. I didn't really know what I was doing. It's kind of one of those things like you're learning as you go through it. I think, you know, that's probably the case for everybody who's deciding to join the military, and some things looking back in hindsight, maybe are not what you thought they would be. But it's all turned out well, and thankful that, you know, I've had the family support through it all as well. So
can I just say something about that too, real quickly? Because I mean, you're talking about going back to 16 when Keith was, like you said, like 4th, 5th grade. I remember him coming to my wife and I and saying, "Hey, Mom, Dad, you know, I want to do this." And he listed like 3 specific things in the Army that he wanted to be. And they were some of the hardest things, you know, in this kind of tier that's like, yeah, Keith, maybe one of those things, but I don't think you can do like all of those things. And so much to put us to shame. And I know there's not a lot he can actually mention in specifics about this, but he actually did all 3 of those things, and now is serving at a pretty high level. We're so proud of him. And he's not going to say this, but we're so very, very proud of him and all that he's been able to accomplish. And especially as an officer, which is very difficult because the competition goes way through the roof because there's so fewer serving as commissioned guys than there are enlisted guys. So he's done super, super well. He's proved us wrong. You know,
well, I can say I've only been able to get to those, you know, achieve those achievements through, you know, the support and help of other people around me, not only my family, but professionally as well. So, yeah, you know, the Army's a family too. And as long as you're kind of cultivating and building those good relationships, like anywhere, you know, they kind of help you along the way. So
let's say,
were you scared at all? And I'm not talking about specifically the military. I'm just saying, were you scared of like the unknown? Because we talk a lot about, you know, obviously dads talking to their kids about different careers and just the unknown of not what's, you know, where you're going to go, where you're going to be a year from today. Was there any scared feelings as you look back now?
So I'm going to follow up with just and answer the second part of this is like, and did ROTC help you with that? I mean, like, would you suggest that somebody do that first, and can they still make up their mind if they say, figure out like a year or 2 into it, I don't think it's for me? So
I think absolutely. So I know at least when I was going through ROTC, they gave you the opportunity to do the first year. Basically no strings attached, no hardline commitment. You could decide to opt out if you decided it wasn't what you wanted to do. But for me, I've always kind of, I don't know, I've been drawn to kind of just jumping into things, not always knowing what's on the other side. And sometimes that can turn out in a negative way, but I don't know. I kind of like the thrill of, obviously in a kind of more calculated, methodical way. Hey, let's take this risk, move forward with this thing, and kind of trust that, you know, if I'm kind of put things in place, maybe it'll work out great, maybe not. But so far it's worked out really well. So yeah, I think there was a little bit of fear going into kind of some of the unknowns of joining the military. But I think being so preoccupied with trying to line everything out, trying to get the job I wanted in the Army, because that was a competitive process in ROTC. A lot of that's kind of pushed out of your head because you're kind of having to be focused and kind of maintain kind of your eyes on what you want to do, what you think you want to do at that time. Because in ROTC, you know, though you are learning about the military, there's still a lot to be learned after you complete college and commission. But kind of those experiences I'm continuing to have where you can pursue different careers inside of the military, kind of with some unknowns. But I don't know, it's been something I've kind of been drawn to is, hey, let's go ahead and try this out and see how it works. And fortunately enough in the military, you can try things, and if it doesn't work out, there's always something else. But going through ROTC, I think did help because it allowed you to kind of get an inside look at the military without actually being fully committed for at least that first year. But again, I think there are wonderful opportunities on the enlisted side as well. And I think it just depends on the person, kind of what you want to do and kind of what you feel like, you know, you're being led to do. But I never discourage young people from enlisting as well. I think there's some negative connotations with people enlisting. I think people kind of think like, oh, you're enlisting right after high school, so you had nothing else for yourself, and I think that's kind of a negative skew on people joining the military that, I don't know. I just think people don't understand kind of how far you can go on the enlisted side and what opportunities are available to learn not only military skills, but technical skills and, other things that are very specific that can help people in the civilian side after their time in the military too. But
so what kind of what qualities or characteristics do you think someone needs to be successful in a military occupation?
I think one thing that I was fortunate to have growing up was that we were taught at an early age. I think learning how to work and just being disciplined at an early age to kind of do the things that aren't as enjoyable, do the hard things, for me carried over into my military service, and I think allowed me to be a little more successful. Having younger soldiers and seeing some different people attempt service in the military without kind of having the discipline. So I think just discipline, just kind of learning how to do the hard things and learning how to do the things that aren't always enjoyable. It's just something I've seen in my recent experience. And then just having high moral character. I think those are the two main things. Just people having issues with integrity and honesty and things like that get them into trouble earlier in their career. And it kind of just stops them before they even get off the ground. So for me, my dad, he kind of had us out working and doing different things at an early age, which, I really appreciate now looking back, because I feel like that's carried over not only into my adult life in the professional sense, but in other endeavors, hobbies that I have too, that have allowed me to kind of work a little harder at those. And, so good
to hear that, because I used to tell them, boys, someday you're going to thank me for this,
It's true. It's true.
Today's the day, Dad.
That's right. Hey,
I'm basking, man.
I'm basking in it.
So one thing that, when we were setting this all up, Keith mentioned that I think we ought to talk about is like sometimes when somebody wants to go into Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, their parents say, well, that's dangerous. I don't want you to do that because it's dangerous, even though the young person might say, but that's what I really want to do. So how do you speak to that? What do you say to that?
I think what I would say to that is, I think in many occupations, there are dangers that are real and present. But I think that it speaks a lot about a person, especially a young person, and especially when there's global conflict going on that we are involved in, to want to join the military at a time where it could mean, or where there's the possibility of physical harm to themselves. Understanding as a parent, having my own kids, I haven't had to experience that yet because they're all under the age of 7. But kind of having these thoughts in my head, having been in the military, if they wanted to join the military, I think like any parent, I would have concerns for their safety. But I think what I would say to parents who are maybe struggling with that is just to understand, be proud that your son or daughter wants to, live a life of service, do something, I guess, that they say is bigger than themselves. And that in reality, in most cases, the military is no more dangerous than, many other occupations that are out there and available today. Not to say that there aren't inherent dangers, and depending on your job, you can be put in situations that are dangerous. I would just say to those parents, hey, your son or daughter is willing to do something that's very honorable, and you should be proud of kind of what they want to do. And again, recognize that, yes, there are dangers out there, but at the end of the day, again, I haven't had to experience it yet, but our kids got to go on and do what they want to do. And, I think though I'd be worried at times, I think I'd be thankful that, my son or daughter would want to pursue a career of service and something that's kind of outside of just their own gain. So I don't know if that helps or makes sense, but I'm sure my dad can probably speak onto that.
So how about your dad though? Dad, you had to probably hear that from some other people.
Well, part of it is too, I'll have to confess that, we were like, hey, you ought to think about the Air Force. It's a different culture, and the Navy's a different culture. There's different cultures within each branch of the service. And, the one thing that I thought was, hey, as long as you don't join the Marine Corps or the Army, you probably, yeah, this is the back of my mind, just because my experience was the Air Force, even though we worked with Marine Corps guys, I worked with Army guys all the time. And I saw some of the nuances as it related to their family experiences and so on. So, but because we, I think, instilled this idea, I don't know, hopefully this is okay to say this, but, we said, hey, you got to learn how to love the suck. Sometimes things just suck in life. You got to learn how to love that, embrace it. And if you can do that, and if you can overcome those areas and just press on and see something beyond what's just for today, then you're going to do well in life, because there's just so many people that miss that opportunity, and there's so many opportunities that go beyond. And so when Keith comes to me and says, yeah, Dad, I want to join the Army. And I'm like, really? Why would you want to do that? He goes, well, Dad, I want to be in the real military, So I do have to say this. So, first deployment, he comes back, and I'll paraphrase it, but, something to the effect that, hey, Dad, I need to apologize. The Air Force is the real military, because, they did some pretty cool stuff when I was over downrange, and, okay, maybe I didn't think of that as, so, maybe redeem the Air Force a little bit there. But I think for us, just real briefly, we get this all the time. And even now, I'll have parents tell me, they just look at us kind of dumbfounded and say, so you're okay with your kids being in the military? I'm well, yeah, we're really proud of them. We just don't understand that, because if you really love your kids, how can you let them do that? I mean, we've actually had people tell me, I've had people tell me that if you really loved your boys, how could you possibly even remotely support something like that? And I said, well, okay, well, maybe we're looking at it wrong, but because we love our boys, and because we wanted to instill in them something that was beyond themselves. And I think that our values played into that, our faith plays into that, our areas of what we feel like is important to the American ideal. I mean, and going back to some of a little old fashioned, but even some of the patriotic ideals. And I'm not talking about weirdness or, extremism. That's not what I mean. In this day and age, I know you have to be really careful how you say that, but just the American ideal of saying that, hey, we want to serve, a world where we believe that all people are created equal, right? And that there is this opportunity. And we live in a pretty crazy world where at times, you may be called upon to do something that would overcome what we would consider to be wrong or bad for humanity, right? And sometimes because we live in this fallen world, it's going to take that. So I'm proud that my boys will be willing to do that. However, at the same time, when they deploy, we've got one deployed now, and my youngest son's currently deployed. And of course, Keith, you've deployed 3 times, and I know we'll deploy again. That's something where we have to come to grips with that as a mom and a dad. My wife, she deals with it completely differently than I do. I deal with it as, we've had some conversations, just to be quite frank, about, hey, do a great job, do what you need to do. I've never said this though, be careful or be safe, because inherently they're trained to do that, but they're also in a position where they're not in a job that you can't really being careful or being safe could maybe not be so good either, because you know what I mean? You gotta go full force. And then I've had to, hug Keith and say, hey, we'll see you on the backside. And then, in my heart, knowing that there's no guarantee, I don't care who you are. It doesn't matter how much you love your child, or how much you love God, how much you pray, or, whatever, because people do a lot of things. When those kinds of things come up, you say, hey, I'm going to, if I just have enough faith. Well, that isn't a guarantee either, because, I know a lot of people have had a lot of faith where their sons or daughters didn't come home. And that's a reality that we just have to live with. So for me, it's like, I personally, I just say, God, I'm thankful, and if he comes home, great. If he doesn't, give us the strength, to deal with that. Or if he doesn't come home whole, because it's not just coming home, right? Sometimes you don't come home. I know a lot of guys who come home and they don't have an arm or a leg, or there's a lot of stuff going on internally, the invisible ones that a lot of guys deal with. And we've had a lot of frank conversations about that. So, all that to say that, I don't know, just through it all, we're very grateful that so far, it's turned out like it has. But all in all, I think we just have to make decisions about, I think maybe it comes down for us that once our children, if you will, our boys grow and they get to be 18, 19, got to let them go, and you got to do it. You got to do what they're called to do. And we now feel the best thing we can do is support that. and do what we can to encourage them to, find what it is that's going to bring them fulfillment.
And I got one more thought on that too. I think a lot of it has to do with, just as parents who maybe have no affiliation with the military or just don't really know kind of the ins and outs of what military service means. I mean, you don't know what you don't know. And I think probably they're drawing a lot of conclusions just based on what they've either seen in the media and movies, things like that, or just what they've heard, which may kind of lead them straight to these negative feelings toward their son or daughter joining the military. And I just think, for the individual deciding to join the military or to go into military service, it means a lot to them, for the parents to be supportive in that, because it is a big decision. But I think parents should rest assured that military service doesn't equal, an immediate death sentence or, immediate danger. There's a lot more to it than that. And there's a lot of great opportunities as well. So yeah, I think it's a lot of it has to do with not knowing kind of what goes on inside the military. And it's things that you wouldn't know unless you have some kind of direct involvement with it or people who know about it.
So true. I would just say this, if and I'm not a political person, so I'm not going to run for office, so nobody get worried. But, I think it would be amazing if every young person, woman or man, coming out of high school, even if it was 2 or 3 years, if they had that experience. There's just something about it, something about teamwork, there's a brotherhood or a sisterhood, I guess we could say that, there's something about what you experience in the military is so unique and so powerful. And I still have, friends that I served with that I feel a bond that I can't even begin to describe, that is just very powerful. I don't know, there's just something about that I think that really is a part of the fabric of our country that sometimes I think is lacking in our communities sometimes, because we don't seem to have that same sense of unity like we used to. You go back to World War II where, maybe 40% of the population was somehow tied to someone who was in active duty. Of course, we were in a world conflict back then too, and what that does to create unity. So anyway, I just mentioned that as kind of a neat thing that could happen to a young person if they have that experience.
Well, I have a very good friend, actually a staff member here at Good Dads, whose son has been in the Army for 18 years, I think. And one thing that was identified was he had good facility for languages. So they actually sent him to school. He learned Farsi. He spends lots of time doing decoding kind of things that we can't know anything about. But we do know that he knows, I think maybe more than one Arabic language. And wow, that's going to be fantastic for him when he gets out. Mm-hmm. And so that's, that's kind of an interesting, that's something that nobody else would have known about him had he not had that experience in the Army. So I think they would say that he had 3 deployments. I think but they would say it was just a really good experience for him. Yeah. So
awesome.
So can you talk a little bit? We just talked to some people in education and we asked them what is the downside of their job or the things that are difficult about their job, or, every job has it. If you're an accountant, it's tax season. If you're a teacher, it's grading papers and other things. But if you're in the military, what would you say are more, maybe not bad, but difficult things that you just have to live with? It's part of being in the military.
Absolutely. No, I think, and probably what I'd be most worried about if my son or daughter decided to join the military, just having had personal experience with it now, is balancing being present in your family and then the obligations you have as a part of military service, like deployments and being away for training and things like that. I think by the time my oldest daughter turned 2, I'd only been there for half of her life at that point. And so I think a lot goes into ensuring that, when you are home, you're as home as you can be mentally, physically, and you're just there for your family. And then just, your spouse understanding that you're going to be gone. And it's just a part of military service. It's difficult to deal with and it's challenging. And I think those things can stress kind of the family life and the home life. And I think of all things, I think it's been the most difficult and challenging thing to see is the negative effect on, my wife and kids through the obligations I've had, through military service, like deployments and training, just being gone for special events. I think I've been home for 1 or 2 of maybe like 2. I've been fortunate enough to be there for the birth of all my kids, but of my 3 kids, I think I've only been there on their birthday, I think 2 or 3 times. So it's just kind of, that's a part of it. It's not easy. It gets easier as you go through it and you find ways to cope with it. But I think just the family struggle and family strain due to military obligation is probably the most difficult thing. Dad, I don't know if you have different experiences with kind of.
But yeah, I mean, from a parent's perspective, and this isn't to garner any sympathy from the community at large, but I don't know that people really understand what military families go through, and it is the warrior and his family, but it's also parents and grandparents, and none of my boys, they're all kind of all over the place. They're not close, and so we don't get to see them very often. Maybe once or twice a year. Which means we don't get to see our grandkids, which is even more important, right? Love to see my son and his wife, but those grandkids, that really good stuff. So it seems like a small thing, but when it's over years, it's over many years, it gets to be a point where it is quite a sacrifice. And of course, then when you couple that with deployments or service, that becomes, okay, well, this could ultimately be life altering, if something were to happen. And that kind of does weigh on your mind too, not just for your son or your daughter, but also for their family. And so from a grandparents or moms and dads standpoint, you carry that stuff a little bit, and we live in a society where, I don't talk about it, and I don't really expect people to understand. And I don't, I'm certainly not wanting people to, they can't understand, because if you haven't been there, it's just difficult. So like when he's deployed and we're, every day we're doing certain things to kind of get through it. I don't come to work and, bob my head and mope around and, but people say, how's it going? What's going good? Now if somebody who has been through it, oh, your son's deployed, well, our son just got back. Well, then all of a sudden I can talk, I can say, well, hey, how did you get through this? And how did you deal with this? And that's one of the things why we're offering these types of opportunities and services with our veteran service organization. We have a kind of a Blue Star family kind of a place, Blue Star family being families that have, loved ones serving downrange, giving them opportunities where they can maybe cope and talk, because it is such a small percentage of the population. But those are some of the difficulties, and it's not, I don't know, it's not really a sacrifice. It just is what it is. You deal with it and you work through it, and it's just interesting how it all kind of comes together. And then at the end of the day, when, even today's a great example, as we're sitting here and I'm listening to my son talk about his personal experience and what he's learning, what he's growing, and some of the things that he's been able to gain by way of just skill set and training. And like you say, and I think some of the top people in our country, you look back to what they're doing today, many of them are veterans, and they learned a lot of those skills, early on by having that experience. Just there's a humble pride. I don't know if is that even possible to say something like that? I don't know. That just kind of sounds weird, but there's a humility that comes with it, but there's also just a real pride. I'm thankful because I know that those are the kinds of things that yield some of the greatest rewards that aren't tangible with money, that aren't necessarily tangible with even recognition, but something about the integrity of a person, and learning about what it means to have an ethos that thinks about other people and not just yourself. And I'm so grateful for that, because I'm watching now their families kind of develop the same type of, thinking. And that just, I don't know, that's a rewarding thing. And I think it's what our society needs more than anything else. We need to really be there for each other more than ever. Right. So kind of hoping that carries over.
Well, I will just say this, coming from the perspective of a family therapist, psychologist, the healthiest families are the families where the parents realize that they don't own the kids, that, they're not writing their resume on the back of their child, that their child has to be responsible to him or herself. I mean, it's not that you don't want to honor your parents, but you also don't own your child, and they don't owe you a certain career or profession. So letting them go to be what they are intended to be is what the healthiest parent does. And that's not always easy.
No, it's interesting. We'd like to think that we've been that. Keith, you please correct me if I'm wrong. And seriously, because if I'm wrong, we need to change. But, and it's funny because when you let them go, when they go to college, you let them go when they do certain, you got to kind of always let them go. I mean, there are times where we fight that, it's like, I want to, oh, no, that's not my place. I can't, I don't want to, he's not 16 anymore. You know, he's not under our purview. He's not my responsibility. We're there now to support, and when they ask, right, too. We have to be careful, because I think I've sometimes probably offered some support when it wasn't necessarily welcomed. But
no, I know my wife and I feel really blessed. You know, my parents and my in-laws as well have both been really supportive, but not to an overbearing degree where we felt, you know, necessarily like super pressured to go one way or the other through some bigger life decisions. But just kind of going back to the struggle and strain put on families, I think military service, depending on what the service member is doing, can kind of make or break your family. And I know for us, kind of navigating some of these challenges has been a serious struggle. But my wife and I sometimes reminisce and look back on kind of the things we've been through and like, man, like, can you believe we just did that? You know, we just finished our 4th PCS move where we did it ourselves, packed our own stuff, moved, and, you know, just kind of the other struggles aside from being away, that are just, it feels like there's constant stress, you know, coming from somewhere, and, you know, having to grow together and deal with that. I think it's been beneficial as well, and just kind of helped strengthen us as a family. But I know for some families, just depending on kind of how they deal with it, it can kind of wear them down and kind of have a more negative effect, just depending on how you kind of take those challenges and navigate them. So, yeah. But yeah, no, on the topic of you guys and family support, parental support, you know, I think that's been huge for us, is knowing that we have that support there, but not to an overbearing degree, or feeling like, you know, our parents are pressuring us to go one way or the other through kind of some of these stressing times. So
in sort of wrapping this up, can you imagine, let's go back to that 16, 17-year-old person. What do you wish someone had told you when you were that age, that you now know, that, you know, when you were 16 or 17, what do you wish someone had told you then that you now know? Keith?
I think the major thing is understanding what expectation management is, kind of building up these ideas and dreams in your head of what something's going to be like. And then you get there, it takes a lot of hard work and you sacrifice a lot to get there, and it's not at all what you thought it was going to be, which isn't always a bad thing. And I think I've had several experiences, and I've made decisions, you know, within my Army career that have had a negative effect on my family, you know, solely my responsibility, solely decisions that I made, and it's kind of had a negative, kind of some negative side effects, because of what it caused me to have to do, or the obligations I had because of those decisions made. Because I thought if I made those decisions, you know, this would be super fulfilling for me, my career, this would be awesome. And kind of getting there, realizing this isn't what I thought it was going to be. It's not really as fulfilling as I thought. And I think just kind of going into whatever your career is, or whether it's military service or outside of the military, just understanding, hey, let's go forward with this. I think this is kind of where I'm being led and what I feel called to do. But kind of disconnect from what you're building up in your head and kind of have an open mind about what things may actually be in reality, and be okay with what it is, and kind of just take that and then move on to the next challenge or move on to the next thing. But for me, I had some disappointments kind of back to back, because I thought this is going to be great. And, you know, it was either something I didn't like, not what I thought it would be. There's all these other things that go into, you know, what I was doing on a daily basis that I didn't enjoy. And, you know, and I kind of got into negative headspaces at times, when if I kind of went in with some good, you know, a mature level of expectation management, it might have been better. And I think it's something that you can develop, or can go into a career early on, understanding. But for me, I was kind of, you know, up in the clouds with what I thought things were going to be like, and it didn't always turn out, you know, the way I thought it would. So, but yeah. I think that's number one.
Kevin?
Yeah, for me, I think it's probably similar in some ways, but for me, when I was 16, I wish somebody would have told me that you cannot control just about everything that happens to you.
That's a good one too. That's a good one too.
and I think military service taught me. I mean, in college, I still thought I could, you know, because you're still making a lot of decisions, you know, whether you want to go to class, skip class, or whatever. You know, there's consequences to all those things. But in the military, it goes beyond consequence. It's that quintessential environment where you just don't control any of it, you know, and the only thing that you control is your response to the things you can't control. And so I learned that, you know, through basic training, and then on to my, you know, other things. And I'll tell you, that was the greatest lesson for me when I finally embraced that and said that, you know, the only thing that I can control is my response and my and even though my emotions, sometimes I couldn't even control that, you know, but I could I could kind of say, okay, I've got a choice on how I behave, what I decide to do to move forward. And I can look at this optimistically, or I can look at it pessimistically, and that's going to make all the difference in the world. And so that just helped me. I think if somebody could, I don't know if you can tell kids at 16 that and then listen. You know, somebody could have told me that, and I probably wouldn't have heard it. You know, but it's definitely something that I think is so important to life, and has made it a lot easier. I think now in my role, hopefully as a father and and now a grandfather, which I'm really being, you know, I'm enjoying that. And as a husband, you know, and all those things that say, you know what, it's not about me. You know, it really isn't. It's so refreshing and so freeing when you say it's about the other people that are entrusted to me, where you find the greatest fulfillment. And I just don't know. And again, not to say that this isn't something that people know, but I wonder if maybe that's a lesson that would just be a lot more powerful for us to embrace. And I'm still doing it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not perfect at it, but I think having that reality was a big, huge thing for me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your service. We appreciate it. And it was very nice talking to you both.
We know
Absolutely.
you're both
Thanks for having us
busy, so thank you for taking out time to talk to us. We really appreciate it.
Well,
Okay.
thank you as well. Appreciate you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.